of the relationship between government and human beings.
Mm-hmm.
Our founders actually laid it out that it's actually a right. That means it's legal.
Mm-hmm.
It's a legal assertion, and it's foundational to every other right. My right to be secure in my person, paper, and property, my right to keep and bear arms, well, that can only happen if I'm alive.
Right.
And so the right to life, and our founders saw that if the government can arbitrarily decide whose life can be lost or who they will prosecute, if they can arbitrarily decide, well, it's okay that that person's life is lost, we're not going to bother with that. No, the purpose of government is very, very defined, and our founders defined it, and they decided to start with that basic starting point, the right to life. So the right to life is a legal assertion first and foremost, and if we don't pay attention to that, it's very easy to get pulled into our theology, into our emotions, into the many, many, many tangents that it impinges on, and it does. And we're going to talk about all of those things.
Yes, on the Life Matters program.
That's right, and as you know, so my actual forte was when I was inspired by Francis Schaeffer years ago. But I worked with the elderly, and I saw immediately the danger of euthanasia, and we're seeing it now. California has now legalized assisted suicide. We're fighting it. There is a court case, but this is very, very scary because if your emotions are what are guiding you in the right to life, and I actually have had pro-life people tell me this, Brian, I'm with you on the babies.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Right.
But you weren't there when my dad died. It was so hard.
Right.
And they reveal that their emotions are guiding their moral judgment. Their emotions, and you already know this, a lot of us know this, that for a lot of Christians, their theology is actually their emotion.
It's a lot more emotional.
And we have to cut through that fog because the fog is thick and in a battle of ideas, and it's a real battle.
Yeah, and certainly as Brian Johnston is with me today here on The Bottom Line. I'm Roger Marsh. Brian is the Executive Director of the California Pro-Life Council and the host of a brand new show that's coming to Crawford Broadcasting West Coast, not just K-Bright, but K-Bright, KNSN, KCBC, a new show called Life Matters, which makes its debut this Saturday, 1 o'clock. We encourage you to tune in to all the Crawford stations here on the West Coast. For all of California, it's a really good fit, Brian, because of the work that you're doing, obviously, up and down the state, and the fact that we have listeners here at The Bottom Line all across the state of California who want to know more. And I was talking to Kirsten Lynch, who's the director of the 40 Days for Life outreach here in Orange County, and she said one of the reasons that she likes the Sanctity of Life segment that we do here on The Bottom Line show is the simple reason that there's a lot of education, there's a lot of information that needs to go on, because to your point, we're talking about this as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and the framers are saying life is that essence, your right to be alive, your right to be born, your right to live, your right to not have somebody else take your life from you. It's much more than an emotional/theological issue, which is the emotional or whatever. I'm trying to think about how you put the two together, but that for a lot of people, that's where it is. I'm passionate about this, therefore my theology is that way. Instead of saying, okay, what's the theological argument? What's the emotional component, which is a part of being a human being. We're emotional people, but also then the legal part. And what you're purposing to do with Life Matters is to say, look, life matters. That's the starting point for us.
That's right. And we have to look at the facts. As you look back to the founders, what they asserted was really unique. What they asserted was essential, and that is, they said that facts can be known, that truth can be known, and they asserted that this is based on self-evident truths, that the laws of our nation were not going to be based on your theology or mine. All of them had different theologies.
Sure.
They asserted it was based on the self-evident truths expressed in the laws of nature and of nature's God. And they asserted that the human lives that the Creator had made, those are what have value, not the government.
And that's what we call natural law.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that a government is considered just to the degree that it protects those lives because it derives its just power from those lives.
Yeah.
So lives are very important. And if we don't understand that's our starting point, then it's going to get very easy to begin to get relativistic. And by that I mean a lot of times you'll have people say, well, I'm pro-life because my church teaches that.
Right.
Well, it's good that your church teaches that, but that's not the reason the right to life exists.
And the flip side of that, Brian, I'm talking with Brian Johnston today here on The Bottom Line, Executive Director of the California Pro-Life Council, host of the brand new show Life Matters every Saturday at 1 o'clock, half hours of just a great conversation going to be happening every Saturday on K-Bright, KCBC. Check it out online at thebottomlineshow.com. We'll have a link up for that. But when you were talking about that whole issue of, what's the definition, I was talking with a good friend of mine whose his wife is very, very strong advocate for gun laws, gun control, things like that. And I was thinking there's got to be a story somewhere. I mean, there has to be a reason why. And the other day on social media, she shared the story about how her brother was a victim of an accidental gunshot that wound up leaving him brain impaired. It was a horrible situation. And I'm thinking, even something like that, that's an issue for the Sanctity of Life crowd to come in and say, what kind of quality of life does somebody have, and something like that. There's a separate argument about the gun issue, but in terms of what happens to somebody in that situation. But I knew that's her story. And that's her story. And so I realized that in that moment, okay, everybody's got a story. Everyone that you see at an abortion clinic who's protesting, picketing, praying, everybody who comes to a rally, everybody who hits up the California Pro-Life Council page, they're coming from the perspective of, I have a story. And when we understand that, then it makes the law part a lot easier to, how do I present the legal argument that you're talking about? How do I talk about the moral argument from the perspective of, what kind of story do you need to hear? You're not trying to lie to people, but you want to know what perspective they're coming from.
That's right. And if every life has value, if that's our assertion, that means your life does.
Yeah.
You are incredibly unique. Every listener is incredibly unique. The signature that God put on every cell of your body.
Now, I have to admit, Brian, I mean, just before we go any further here, you do such a great Donald Trump impersonation that I don't know that necessarily, Donald Trump's unique, but you're right up there, buddy. I mean, I know a couple of guys who do great things, and so it's nice that you can mimic